What if the secret that could tear your family apart wasn't hidden in a diary or whispered behind closed doors, but dropped casually into a group text? One message, one detail, and suddenly the truth no one was ready to face comes crashing into the open. In TLC's Poly Family, that moment turns a complicated arrangement into a full-blown emotional battleground. Every family has its own story, and no matter how perfect things may look from the outside, there are always cracks just beneath the surface. Some families argue over money, others struggle with communication, while some simply cannot escape the weight of the past. But what if there was one family whose story was so unconventional, so layered with love, jealousy, conflict, and hope that it left audiences around, the world questioning everything they thought they knew about relationships? This is the story of a family that redefined what it means to be together. A family that stepped in front of the cameras and revealed their struggles to millions, showing that love in all its forms can be both beautiful and messy, and yet fascinating to watch. Reality television has long thrived on stories of drama and human connection, from housewives clashing at dinner parties to contestants crying under the pressure of competition. Viewers have always been drawn to the raw and unfiltered sides of human life. But in the case of this family, the drama was not about winning a prize or surviving an island. It was about making love work between multiple people and balancing the impossible expectations of commitment and freedom. This family introduced themselves to the world in a way few others dared. They were open about the fact that their relationship was not like most traditional households Tay was described. As a wife, Alicia was presented as a girlfriend, and then the roles reversed. Alicia was called the wife, while Tay became the girlfriend, and as confusing as this seemed to outsiders, this was their truth, and the cameras were there to capture it. All from the very beginning, the emotional weight was clear. One partner longed for reassurance, another felt unseen. Jealousy simmered under the surface, while love kept pulling them back into each other's orbit. The audience could feel it. The contradictions. The push and pull of wanting security, but also independence, trying to honor feelings, but also fearing what they might mean. It made for gripping television, but more than that, it was a mirror held up to the nature of relationships themselves. Because, if we are honest, every couple in some way battles with trust, communication, and the fear of losing what they love most here. It was simply magnified for the world to see as the show unfolded. It became obvious that this was not just a simple relationship. Experiment, there was a history behind it. Years of love and heartbreak tangled together. Sean and Tay had been together for 6 years before stepping into this current chapter of their lives, while Alicia and Tyler had a bond that stretched over 11 years, complete with 2 children. These were not fleeting romances or overnight decisions. They were connections built over time. Connections that had endured ups and downs, and yet found themselves tested again in this new dynamic. The backstory added depth to the drama because it showed that these were not strangers, trying out an idea of shared love. These were people with years of history, carrying old wounds, unresolved conflicts, and unspoken fears into a new arrangement, and that weight could not be ignored. The cameras caught moments that were hard to watch. A conversation that began with affection suddenly shifted into tears. One partner expressing the fear that their feelings for another were growing, while the rest of the group struggled to make sense of what that meant. Each scene seemed to echo with the same question: can love truly be divided, and if it can, what does it take to make it work? What struck viewers most was not only the tension, but also the vulnerability. One could see the desire to make it work, to hold on to something precious, even as it slipped through their fingers. And yet jealousy lingered like a shadow. It became a theme that wove its way through nearly every episode. At first, subtle glances, or tense body language, then later open admissions of doubt and insecurity. One person admitted to feeling overlooked, another feared being replaced slowly. The jealousy spread its roots until it touched almost every corner of the relationship dynamics, and the audience sat captivated, torn between rooting for love to survive and anticipating the next unraveling moment. Reality television has always thrived on extremes, but here, the extremes were not staged competitions. They were emotions as real. As they come, anger, love, doubt, hope, and the courage to admit what many would never say out loud in private. The show became a cultural talking point, not only because of its unconventional family structure, but because it dared to ask the difficult questions about love and loyalty. Could someone truly love two people? Equally, could jealousy ever be fully tamed? Could history and old wounds ever allow for a fresh start? Or were they destined to circle the same arguments again and again for some? Viewers, The Family became an inspiration proof that love could take many forms, and that honesty was the most important foundation for others. It was a cautionary tale, a demonstration of how jealousy can poison even the strongest of bonds, and how difficult it is to balance multiple hearts in a world that struggles even with two. What made the story even more compelling was that it was not only about romantic love, it was also about the children, about creating stability in the midst of chaos, about making choices that would not only affect the adults but also the next generation. Watching from the sidelines, these deeper layers gave the narrative weight because they reminded viewers that this was not simply a television spectacle, it was real life with real consequences. Each fight, each tear, each confession carried ripple effects beyond the screen. And that made it all the more gripping. The lore, as fans called it, grew as details of the past emerged. People debated online about who was right, who was wrong, and whether this was a story of love or simply of denial of truths too painful to face. The fascination grew not only because of what happened on screen, but also because viewers saw pieces of themselves in the story. Every relationship has its jealousies, every couple faces moments of doubt, every family carries its dysfunction. Here, it was simply amplified for the world to witness and analyze. It is easy to laugh or to criticize from the outside, but when you peel away the cameras, the lights, the editing, what remains is the universal human desire to love and be loved, to hold on to connection, even when it is messy, imperfect, and at times unbearable. That is why. Despite the chaos, despite the tears, despite the seemingly endless cycle of jealousy, people kept watching. They wanted to see if love could endure, if the bonds of years could survive the weight of insecurity, if this family could find a way to put the function in dysfunctional and redefine what togetherness truly means. At the center of this story lies a figure whose emotions shape the very foundation of the family dynamic, and that person is Alicia. From the very beginning, she emerged as one of the most compelling personalities on screen, not because she was the loudest or the most dominant, but because her feelings often carried the weight of the conflicts that unfolded, particularly around jealousy. Alicia's journey within this relationship arrangement revealed both her strengths and her struggles, and for many viewers, she became the lens through which they understood just how complicated non-traditional love could be. When Alicia first began exploring the idea of non-monogamy, her heart was filled with curiosity. She wanted to understand what her partner was doing with others. She wanted honesty and transparency, and so she asked questions, but those answers often left her feeling unsettled. Her competitive nature made it nearly impossible not to compare herself to others. She admitted that she often measured herself against her partner's connections with new people. And when those comparisons did not favor her, the result was sadness and self-doubt. Her openness to the idea of shared love was challenged by the very insecurities that arose from it. The origins of this family's journey into unconventional love were tangled and complex. Alicia and Tyler had shared a long history together. Their relationship had roots stretching back more than a decade, complete with 2 children and a life built on routine and familiarity. Meanwhile, Sean and Tay had been together for years, forming their own bond when these 2 couples crossed paths. It was under unusual circumstances, and that meeting planted the seed for everything that followed. There was a sense of undeniable attraction, particularly between Alicia and Sean. What began as an experiment quickly deepened into a relationship of its own for some. This made sense for others. It raised the question if Alicia struggled so deeply with jealousy. Why step into such an arrangement to begin with? That paradox sat at the core of her story. It seemed almost contradictory that someone so open about her insecurities would embrace a lifestyle that magnified them. Yet perhaps that was what made her so relatable. Many people pursue love even when they fear losing it. Many people chase experiences that test them, and Alicia was no different. Her attraction to Sean was not something she could easily dismiss. It was clear, to both viewers and her partners, that their bond carried an intensity that could not be ignored. Some even remarked that they appeared more in love than anyone else in the arrangement, which only fueled further tension when jealousy entered the BF. Picture the narrative shifted away from a neat idea of a four-way partnership and instead revealed itself as a collection of individual relationships that often overlapped rather than truly unified as one cohesive unit in practice. It seemed less like a shared family and more like pairs who occasionally crossed paths emotionally and physically. This realization reshaped the way viewers understood the family dynamic. The early vision of harmony gave way to the reality of division and longing. At the heart of these struggles were questions of intimacy for Alicia. Connection often felt fragile. She longed for reassurance from her partner, and when she did not receive it in the way she needed, her insecurities deepened. Meanwhile, Tay shared her own challenges. Particularly in her bond with Tyler, she confided that after giving birth and undergoing surgery, the intimacy she once relied upon to feel close had become distant. It was not simply about romance or passion, it was about the way they communicated their love to one another. For Tay, the absence of that physical bond created a gap that words alone could not fill. She admitted that their connection felt strained, not because they did not talk, but because the rhythm of how they used to affirm each other had changed. She missed that closeness, and without it, she felt unsure of how to maintain the same depth in their relationship. For viewers, these moments offered a glimpse into the raw humanity of the family beyond. The labels beyond the unconventional structure were individuals grappling with universal fears. Am I enough? Does my partner still desire me? How do we maintain connection when life and circumstances change? The audience could see themselves in these questions, even if their own relationships looked different from the outside. As the episodes progressed, certain dynamics became clearer, while Alicia's jealousy was an ongoing theme. Others in the group revealed their own insecurities too. But what fascinated audiences most was the way affection often appeared uneven. Both Sean and Tyler at times seemed more drawn toward Tay. Their interactions carried an ease and playfulness that highlighted her confidence and openness. Tay herself admitted that intimacy had always been her strongest bond with Tyler and with Sean as well. It was where she felt most connected and where she believed her worth was most visible. But for Alicia, who carried a more guarded energy, this contrast was painful. It added to her fears that she was being overshadowed, that she was not receiving the same level of attention that others seemed to enjoy. This imbalance, whether real or perceived, magnified her jealousy and cast a shadow over the entire arrangement. What emerged from these dynamics was not simply a story about alternative lifestyles, it was a portrait of how deeply personal struggles can ripple outward, affecting everyone involved. Jealousy is a universal emotion, but in a structure where multiple relationships coexist, it does not remain contained, it spreads, it multiplies, and soon it becomes the thread pulling at the seams of every connection. Viewers debated endlessly about Alicia's choices. Some argued that she should never have entered this arrangement if jealousy was such a strong part of her nature. Others sympathized, believing that she was simply brave enough to confront emotions most people bury in silence. After all, who among us has not compared ourselves? To another who has not wondered whether we measure up, who has not asked for honesty, only to find that the truth hurts more than silence. In this sense, Alicia was not only the center of the drama, she was also the most human she revealed on screen. What many hide behind closed doors, her willingness to be vulnerable even when it made her appear conflicted, made her compelling to watch. As the season unfolded, it became increasingly clear that the group functioned less as one family and more as shifting pairs, each with its own struggles. Alliances formed and dissolved, loyalties were questioned. Affection ebbed and flowed, and jealousy remained ever present like a quiet storm, hovering just above the surface. What fascinated viewers was not only the drama itself, but the underlying psychology, the way people navigated love when it no longer fit into the traditional mold. The way old wounds resurfaced in new contexts, the way attraction could override caution, and the way fear could undo years of trust. All of this combined into a portrait of a family that was both extraordinary and ordinary extraordinary, because their story was so different from what most people experience. Ordinary because their emotions were the same ones. We all face love, fear, jealousy, hope, longing, insecurity, and the desperate desire to belong together. These elements created a narrative that was gripping, heartbreaking, and thought-provoking all at once. And it left audiences wondering whether this family could ever find harmony, or whether their story would remain a cautionary tale about the difficulties of balancing more than one heart at a time. As the story moved forward, the dynamics inside this household became more layered and more difficult to ignore. What began as curiosity about shared love and unconventional partnership soon transformed into a daily test of patience, honesty, and endurance. Alicia's emotions remained at the center of this storm because her struggle with jealousy was not a fleeting problem, but an ongoing current that pulled at every decision, every conversation, and every connection. She was part of the more she asked questions about her partner's interactions with others, the more conflicted she became. The answers, while honest, often left her unsettled because they forced her to confront comparisons. She could not escape. She described herself as a competitive person, someone who naturally measured her worth against others, and in a structure where multiple partners were part of the equation, this habit became a constant challenge. Her history with Tyler, already complicated by over a decade of partnership and 2 children, meant that her expectations were heavy. With the weight of shared responsibilities, she wanted reassurance that she was still the anchor of his life. Yet the arrangement demanded that she accept his intimacy with others at the same time. Sean's presence only deepened this struggle because their bond carried a passion that could not be ignored. Alicia and Sean's attraction appeared undeniable, and some believed it outshined the relationships around them. But for Alicia, this did not bring her peace. Instead, it magnified the conflicts within her heart. If she felt so deeply connected to Sean, why did insecurity still surface? Why was she not satisfied, and why did she continue to wrestle with emotions that undermined her happiness? At the same time, Tay brought her own perspective to the screen. Her honesty about intimacy and the way she connected with Tyler revealed another layer of vulnerability after giving birth and undergoing surgery. She found that the physical closeness she once relied upon had shifted. She explained that while she and Tyler could still talk and function as partners, something was missing. The way they used to affirm each other through closeness was gone, and without it, she felt insecure about her place in the relationship. This admission resonated with viewers who understood that many long-term couples face similar challenges. The difference here was that the challenge was magnified by the presence of other partners and the constant comparisons that came with them. The show revealed how intimacy played different roles for each member of the family. For some, it was the glue that kept the bond strong. For others, it was simply one layer among many, but when physical connection was removed, whether by circumstance or by choice, the cracks in the relationship quickly became visible. Tay's longing for that closeness reminded viewers that behind every dramatic argument was a very human desire to feel wanted and valued. Meanwhile, a subtle but significant theme emerged through the way the men in the group responded. Both Sean and Tyler at times seemed to shower more attention on Tay. Their interactions appeared light, playful, and filled with affection in ways that drew notice from both the audience and Alicia herself. The perception that Tay was receiving more admiration created tension that could not be ignored, whether it was intentional or not. Alicia often felt overshadowed, and the label of being too restrained, too careful, too cautious compared to her counterpart left her struggling to redefine her worth. She admitted that she did not always feel as adventurous or as bold, and this difference became a source of insecurity. The very idea that her qualities might be considered less exciting in a household where passion was a currency made her question her own value. Viewers watching these moments unfold could not help but debate the fairness of these dynamics. Was Alicia truly being sidelined, or was she seeing shadows where there were none? Was Tay simply more open and therefore naturally received more attention, or did the men gravitate toward her because they found her easier to connect with? Regardless of the answer, the result was the same. Alicia's insecurities grew, and the family found itself drawn into cycles of conflict that never seemed to fully resolve. What became increasingly evident was that despite the outward label of a four-way, relationship. The reality looked very different. Instead of a unified household built on equal love, it appeared more like a series of overlapping pairs, Sean with Alicia, Tyler with Tay, and occasional connections across those lines rather than a true partnership among all four. The vision of harmony that might have inspired them to begin this journey seemed distant, replaced by jealousy comparisons and constant reassessments of loyalty. The idea of a shared family was often overshadowed by the reality of private alliances. For many viewers, this was where the intrigue of the show reached its height. The spectacle of multiple partners under one roof was attention-grabbing on its own, but the deeper fascination lay in how ordinary insecurities transformed under extraordinary circumstances. Jealousy is difficult enough in a traditional relationship with only two people. Add additional partners, shifting loyalties, and unresolved personal struggles, and suddenly jealousy becomes a magnifying glass exposing every hidden crack. This tension gave the narrative a rhythm that was both exhausting and enthralling. Moments of warmth were quickly followed by suspicion. Laughter turned into conflict. Small misunderstandings escalated into major rifts, and just when it seemed peace might return, another wave of insecurity rolled through the house. The cycle repeated itself over and over until the audience began to wonder not if, but when the next conflict would erupt. The family themselves often appeared caught between two worlds. On one hand, they wanted to embrace the promise of non-traditional love, a life where multiple partners could coexist with honesty and passion. On the other hand, they were constantly confronted with the reality that such a life demanded more emotional resilience than they sometimes had. The dream of harmony clashed with the truth of human emotion, and each clash left scars that seemed to run deeper over time. For Alicia, this meant an ongoing battle between her ideals and her emotions. She wanted to believe in the vision of shared love, but her competitive spirit and need for reassurance often left her doubting her place in the arrangement. She admitted to asking questions she knew might hurt her, and to comparing herself even when it led to unhappiness, and yet she stayed because her connection with Sean was powerful. She stayed because her history with Tyler was long and filled with shared responsibility. And she stayed because part of her believed that the struggles might one day lead to a balance she had not yet found. For Tay, it meant learning how to rebuild closeness after change. She knew that her connection with Tyler needed more than conversation. She longed for the physical affirmation that had once been a constant between them. And when it was absent, she felt the weight of that absence pressing down on her self-esteem. She did not want to be defined only by intimacy, yet she admitted it was how she felt most connected, and without it, she felt uncertain. And for the men in the group, their actions, intentional or not, created ripples that fueled these insecurities. Sean's bond with Alicia was undeniable, but his ease with Tay stirred. Quiet storms. Tyler's loyalty to Alicia as the mother of his children remained clear, yet his responses to Tay's longing often left Alicia questioning her own importance together. These patterns created a household where love and conflict were inseparable, where every moment of joy carried the shadow of jealousy, and where the audience was left captivated by the question of whether these bonds could endure. The deeper the story unfolded, the clearer it became that this was not only a narrative about one unconventional family. It was also a mirror reflecting the struggles of many relationships: jealousy, the desire for reassurance, the fear of being overshadowed. These are not unique to non-traditional families. They are human struggles faced by countless couples everywhere. The difference here was that they played out under the lens of reality, television magnified for the world to see. And in that magnification lay the true fascination, not simply the relationships themselves, but what they revealed about love, trust, and insecurity in a world where no family, no matter how traditional or unconventional, is ever perfect. This part of the story focuses on how Alicia often feels left out in the dynamic, especially after comments suggesting that she's too simple compared to others. That insecurity creates an entirely new layer of conflict in the relationship. When the group is asked to describe their bond, the response is surprising. They admit they live together, raise kids together, and share partners. But if it weren't for this arrangement, they probably wouldn't even be friends. That statement alone shows how fragile the foundation really is. The problems don't stop there. In one tense moment, Tyler casually sends medical details about the baby to the group chat. Sean interprets it as intentional because the information revealed who the biological father was, and it wasn't him. This revelation sparks a heated clash, with both men arguing not just about parenting, but about deeper trust issues that have been building for years. What becomes clear is that this isn't just one argument or one misunderstanding. Their conflicts keep resurfacing, and instead of working things out together, they retreat to their original partners. It leaves you questioning why they continue in a setup that seems to bring more stress than connection. At the end of the day, Hollywood isn't just about glamour and red carpets. It's about power, secrets, and the scandals that often stay hidden until the truth forces its way into the spotlight. Whether it's courtroom drama, relationship, chaos, or behind-the-scenes deals, one thing is certain: the story never ends here, and as always, we'll be watching, digging, and uncovering the pieces others try to keep buried.